Okay, hi. So in this video we're going to have a look at the idea of competition. Now, competition exists because there is nothing really on the earth which is an infinite resource. Everything is going to be finite. And even something like sunlight, you might think, well, we're getting unlimited sunlight. Well, if you've ever stood in the shade, that means that something else has outcompeted you for that sunlight because you are standing in a shadow. And that can become very important especially for plants, because if a tall tree is getting all the sunlight, then that means all the plants which are underneath that tree won't be getting any sunlight because the tree is actually blocking it out. And so competition is different organisms competing with each other for the resources of the earth. And even though there are going to be a lot of things crossing over, I'm going to split this up into animals and plants. And that is because they will be competing for slightly different things, and they will be competing against, obviously, different organisms. Now I'm going to start with animals, and the first thing that animals are going to compete for is going to be food. Food. Now what is important is that you've probably already watched the adaptation videos by now. Now, the organisms which are best adapted are going to win the competition for food in this case, and for various different things that we're going to look at. So let's say hypothetically that we had this mouse. Now this mouse is prey, it's low down in the food chain, and it's going to be eaten by a canine. So a canine, just a type of dog. So here are your two competitors. Here they are. Now, who do you think is going to win? Well, I mean, it seems like quite a silly question, really. You've got this timid-looking pug dog down here, looking very cute, but cuteness never caught a mouse. And here you've got a wolf. So a large dog, looks like it's very fast, it's probably got really strong muscles, it can run way faster than this guy. Eyesight might be better, it's got sharper teeth, so it looks like win-win for Mr. Wolf. And the point here, the adaptations of the wolf are such that it will be able to catch prey more effectively than the pug dog. So the wolf looks like it's going to be more camouflaged. The wolf is larger, it can run faster, it's got larger teeth. I'm just going to say it's got better eyesight. And that means that the wolf is most likely going to win if this mouse is found outside in the woods. You could then argue though, but what if this mouse was found in a house, or it was found in a really small space? So it had a little burrow in a really small space. The wolf, even though it's this big powerful animal, can't fit into that small space. This tiny little dog might be able to have more success. And so what that's highlighting really is that adaptation is all based on your environment. You need to adapt to your environment because certain characteristics will be better for one environment and not another. Okay, so let's move these guys to one side. There we go. Okay, so secondly, something that animals do compete for is territory. Territory. So it's no good being able to, being adapted to catch food or to run away from predators, if you've got nowhere where you can reproduce and nowhere you can store that food and nowhere to raise your young. And so territory is needed to feed. It's also needed to reproduce and to grow. So most animals need places where they can grow up safely. Now territory will be fought for basically by different organisms, either of the same species or a different species, because certain territory is way better than others. For example, if you are a bird and you require a lot of water and an open space, the birds will all be competing for the trees which are close to a source of water, so a lake or something like that, and also they'll be competing for branches which are high up, and so the eggs won't be eaten by predators. Okay, and lastly, there will be competition to find a mate. And by mate here we mean obviously mating partner, not just a mate, a buddy. We're talking about finding a mate and reproducing. Now this is almost always within the same species, so within species whereas the other two are often between species. Finding a mate will be within a species, and it usually involves males trying to impress the females, because the females are the ones who, of course, are going to be carrying the young. Unless, of course, you are this male seahorse here who is pregnant and will give birth to multiple seahorses. That is a complete anomaly. Apart from that, all the females are going to be the ones who will be carrying the young. Now, of course, to a lesser extent, this is exactly the same as what happens with humans, because a lot of the time it's going to be males who are trying to impress the females. It might be who's the best at sports, it might be who's got the fastest car, but obviously with humans, this is probably the one species where we see this behaviour is not always true. Because a lot of the time with humans, it might be a female trying to impress the males, and so on. Whereas in nature, with other animals, often it is the males. And they might directly fight. So a very striking example of this is with deer. Deer directly fight. They pretty much headbutt each other with their horns, and whoever wins, then the female will mate with them. Other animals, and a lot of birds are going to be an example here, they show different behaviour and displays. So you've probably seen a male peacock. They are the ones with the extremely colourful tails, and the peacocks with the big largest tails and the most colourful tails are often the ones who will get the girl. Other birds have colourful patterns on their heads, they have colourful little tufts of hair on their head, or it's just who's the best singer. So I guess you could cross that over to human behaviour if you like, there's an argument for and against that. But the hair, if you like, and the singing ability in birds is definitely going to affect which males can reproduce. Okay, so in summary for animals, a successful competitor, so let's do this in a different colour. There we go. Success is going to be an animal which can find a mate, which can find food, and they will be best adapted to compete, or, and this is a big one, or best adapted to, sorry, I'll do this over here, to avoid competition. So often the most successful animals are ones which can absolutely avoid competition with other animals, especially from different species. Because if there is another animal who's better adapted to live in a certain environment, the best way to adapt might be to go and live in a slightly different environment to avoid the competition. Okay, so that is basically a breakdown in animals, and now we're going to have a look at competition in plants. Okay, so what is it that plants are competing for? Well, the most obvious one, I guess, is water. That's because obviously animals have to compete for exactly the same thing. Now what's important here is that plants, much more so than animals really, will vary in size quite massively. If you think about the size of a blade of grass and then you think about the size of an oak tree, then you can sort of see what I mean. And so obviously each of those will require a very different amount of water. And so the size of the plant, obviously the size of the plant itself that we're talking about and the plants which surround it are going to affect how much it can take up water. And if you think about it, let's say we had a tree which looked something like this. There we go, lovely. That's our tree. Now what's going to happen when the seeds of this tree fall off? They will land like here and they'll land here. And so then if new trees grow from this tree, they will be competing directly with the original tree for water. And so that's not really a very stable way of doing things. And so the tree will develop a way in which for the seeds to be spread out over a wide distance. One of those is the sycamore tree, which has seeds which look something like this. So they look something like this. These seeds are obviously adapted in order to be carried by the wind. So it almost looks like a bat. So these things almost act like wings. They really act like propellers, so they spin round and they blow in the breeze, and then this seed will end up floating off like this. It will float off the tree and it will float off wherever, and it will land somewhere, and then that can develop into a new tree which is not going to compete with its parent. Another obvious way that a tree or any plant can provide its seeds is by providing them inside of fruit. So animals come and eat the fruit, obviously because it tastes nice and also it provides nutrition. If the seeds are in that fruit, when the animal is done with the fruit, it'll end up pooing them out basically, so digesting the fruit, sorry, but getting rid of the seeds. The seeds won't be digested. And from the manure, if you like, or from the dung of the animal, then that seed can be carried into the soil and end up growing. And another adaptation, in order to compete for water, is plants which grow roots the fastest. Roots the fastest. So of course, if you have a number of seeds growing in the same place, the one which grows its roots the fastest will have first dibs on the water, and therefore those plants are most likely to survive and outcompete the rest. And that brings us nicely on to the next point, which is sunlight. So plants compete for water, they also must of course compete for sunlight. Now going back to the tree here, if we had a plant which was trying to grow here, and the sun is most of the time over here, so let's say that you've got the sun here, and blah 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 blah, all for drawing, but the sunlight is going to be coming this way, it's going to be taken up by the tree, and therefore we're going to get a shadow cast over here. So this plant is not going to be obtaining sunlight very efficiently. So this one is being out-competed. And that is as a result of the tree. And so obvious things with obtaining sunlight. The taller plants have an advantage. Also, wide leaves. So wide leaves allow a large surface area for sunlight to be collected, and they will also end up covering up other plants. And so if those leaves cover other plants, those plants will be outcompeted as well. And of course, if they're outcompeted and they start to die, that means there's more water left over for these plants. So these will often interlink. And one more, going back to the example with the roots, the ones which grow the roots the fastest will get the most water, while the ones which leaves and shoots grow fastest will get first dibs on the sunlight. And if they take up sunlight and they start to grow quicker than the rest, then they will start to open up and it will stop the other plants from getting any sunlight. So in a sense, it's just the first one there is going to outcompete the rest. Now we did go over some of the other advantages in my previous video on adaptation. One striking one is of course the roots, whether they're going to be deep or whether they're going to be widespread. There are more examples of ways in which plants can compete for water, compete for sunlight, and of course also get their seeds as far out as they can. But if we went through all of them, then this video would take a very long time. So feel free to read over some more in your own time, but I hope this has given you a broad overview. If you do have any questions, please do comment them in the box below or send me an email using the link. But I look forward to seeing you in the next video.